It was a cold Montana night when my old housecat came home from the woods, carrying something small and lifeless in her mouth. I thought she'd caught herself a meal, until she laid it gently on the floor and curled around it like a mother. That tiny creature was a wild bobcat. And from that moment on, what began as a strange act of instinct would change the rest of my life. The rain that night was different, thicker somehow, the kind that soaks through your bones and makes the forest hum with a low, restless growl. From my cabin window, I watched the pines bend under the storm and wondered where Luna had gone. She always came home before dark. For 10 years, she'd been my shadow, my only company since Martha passed. But that night, the woods had swallowed her whole. I sat in my old armchair, the kind that still smelled faintly of motor oil and coffee, listening to the roof drip and the wind scrape the window panes. Every creak of the porch made me sit up. I called her name once or twice, but my voice vanished in the rain. It must have been near midnight when I finally heard the sound, a faint scratching at the door, followed by a muffled cry that wasn't hers. I grabbed my lantern and opened it, expecting a soaked, shivering cat. What I saw instead made me freeze. Luna stood there, drenched to the skin, her fur clinging tight to her ribs. But in her mouth, she held something small and limp. For a moment, I thought she'd dragged home a rabbit. Then I saw the tufted ears, the faint spots along the belly, and the tiny, trembling paws clutching at nothing. It was a baby bobcat. "Good Lord," I whispered, stepping closer. The little thing let out a sound, a half meow, half growl, and my stomach turned cold. Luna dropped it gently at my feet, then pressed her nose against its head, as if to comfort it. Her eyes found mine, wide and wild, as if she was saying, "Help me, please." I didn't move at first. My mind was trying to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Luna had never been outside this long before, never come back with another animal, let alone a predator. The idea hit me so fast, I almost said it out loud. Had she stolen this thing from its mother? Outside, the thunder rolled again, echoing through the valley. I bent down and touched the bobcat's side. It was ice cold, barely breathing. Luna meowed once, sharp and impatient, like she wanted me to do something. So I did. I grabbed an old towel, wrapped the little creature up, and brought them both inside. The lantern flickered as I set them by the wood stove. Luna climbed onto the blanket beside it, curling her body around the tiny bobcat, licking its ears over and over. "Where in God's name did you find him?" I murmured. The kitten's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Its fur was matted, and there was a faint bruise near its neck, maybe from a fall, or maybe from Luna carrying it too tightly. I poured some milk into a saucer, knowing it wasn't. Right for wildcats, but it was all I had. The kitten didn't move. Luna looked up at me again. I'd seen that look once before, the night Martha got sick, and Luna wouldn't leave her side. It was the same look of stubborn, wordless love. I sat back on the floor beside them, feeling the heat from the stove warm my knees. The storm still howled outside, but inside the cabin there was a strange kind of quiet. I could hear the ticking of the clock, the crackle of the fire, and the soft rhythm of Luna's purring. Maybe she hadn't stolen the bobcat. Maybe she'd saved it. I spent the rest of the night watching them. Every time the kitten stirred, Luna adjusted her body, keeping it pressed against her belly. She didn't sleep, not once. Neither did I. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a mist that hung low over the trees. I brewed a pot of coffee, cheap instant stuff, the kind I'd lived on since retirement. The smell filled the cabin, mixing with the damp scent of pine and fir. The kitten was still alive, though weak. Luna followed me around the kitchen, tail up, meowing until I poured her some warm milk. She didn't touch it. Instead, she sat by the kitten, eyes fixed on me, waiting. I knew what she was asking before I said it out loud. "All right," I sighed. "We'll go see Emily." Dr. Emily Foster was the only veterinarian within 30 miles. She'd patched up Luna once after a fight with a raccoon, and she had a soft spot for lost causes. I wrapped the Bobcat in a wool scarf, tucked it inside my coat, and drove through the wet, winding road toward town. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and cedar. Emily looked up from her desk, eyes widening when she saw what I carried. "Harold Bennett," she said, "you didn't just bring me trouble, did you?" I opened the bundle. The kitten stirred weakly. "Luna found him," I said. "Or maybe took him." Emily examined the tiny creature with steady hands. 4, maybe 5 days old," she murmured. "Still got the umbilical cord. Poor thing, probably lost its mother in the storm." She glanced at Luna, who sat by the exam table, her yellow eyes fixed on every move Emily made. When Emily reached for the kitten again, Luna let out a low growl, soft but sharp enough to make her stop. "Well," Emily said, smiling faintly, "looks like someone's claimed the role already." I shook my head. "But she's never had kittens. She's not even—" "Pregnant?" Emily finished. "Doesn't matter. Cats can have false pregnancies, even produce milk sometimes if their hormones trigger the response." She looked at me over her glasses. "If you try to separate them now, Harold, one of them's going to break." I didn't like the sound of that. "So what do I do?" "Keep them warm, feed the baby goat's milk every 2 hours, and let her do what she's trying to do." Emily's voice softened. "Whatever happened last night, Luna's made her choice." The drive home felt longer than usual. The forest shimmered with wet light, every branch dripping. I thought about what Emily said, about choices, about instincts stronger than reason. When we got home, Luna jumped from the truck and darted straight to the old blanket by the stove. I placed the kitten beside her. She sniffed it once, then curled around it again. The kitten's paw brushed her chest, searching blindly, and Luna began to purr, a low, endless hum that filled the room. I stood there for a long time, coffee cooling in my hand, watching them. Maybe I'd never understand why she did it. Maybe no one would. But as the fire cracked and the wind died down, one thought settled quietly in my chest. Sometimes nature's strangest acts of love don't make sense until they save something you didn't know you'd lost. Outside, the clouds broke open, and a single beam of morning light slid through the window, landing on the two of them. The thief and her stolen child, asleep in the warmth of a world that, for once, didn't judge them. Morning in Montana always smells like pine and old rain. By the time the fog lifted off the trees, Luna had already settled back into her post beside the stove, her head resting protectively over the Bobcat. I hadn't slept more than an hour, and my back ached from the armchair. But I couldn't take my eyes off them. The little one, Emily had called him a kit, was still weak, though he breathed a little easier now. His chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm, but at least it moved. Luna licked his ears again and again like she was trying to wake him from a bad dream. I brewed another cup of coffee and stared out the window. The forest looked peaceful now, but I knew better. Out there, life and death lived only a few feet apart. Maybe that was why this felt so wrong, and so right at the same time. When I called Emily later that morning, she sounded calm, like she'd seen stranger things. "He's going to need round-the-clock care," she said. "Keep him warm. Try feeding him every couple of hours. And Harold, don't fight her instincts. If Luna wants to mother that Bobcat, let her." I laughed softly. "You think she knows what she's doing?" "I think she knows better than either of us. So I followed the instructions. I warmed some goat's milk in a small bottle Emily gave me, testing it against my wrist the way I remembered Martha used to do with our grandkids. The Bobcat refused at first, turning his head away weakly. Then Luna nudged him toward the bottle with her paw. He latched on. The sound he made, a tiny, wet, suckling noise, felt like music after the storm. Hours passed like minutes. The bottle emptied, and the kit fell asleep, his paw gripping Luna's fur. I remember thinking how small he looked against her gray coat, like a single leaf clinging to the side of a tree. By evening, I went into town to pick up more supplies. The grocery store clerk, young guy who couldn't have been 20, whistled when he saw the formula on the counter. "Bottle-feeding kittens again, Mr. Bennett?" I hesitated. "Something like that." "Man, you're a saint," he said with a grin. "You should post about it. People love animal rescue stories online. You'd get more views than a car insurance ad." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Son, I'm too old to go viral." But as I drove home with the supplies, formula, blankets, and a little heating pad, I wondered if maybe people should hear about this. The world had enough anger these days. Maybe it could use a story about a cat who decided to raise a predator as her own. Back at the cabin, I pushed the door open quietly. Luna was waiting right where I left her. She'd made a nest out of my old flannel shirts near the stove. The Bobcat stirred when I came in, opening his mouth in a silent yawn. For the first time, I saw his eyes, still sealed shut, but twitching as if dreaming. "Guess we're in this together," I said softly. That night, the temperature dropped hard. The heating pad hummed faintly beneath the blanket, but the chill crept into my bones. I pulled another log onto the fire. Luna didn't move an inch, her body wrapped around the kit like armor. Sometime near dawn, I woke to a strange sound, soft crying, but not from the kitten. Luna was pacing in circles, tail twitching. The kit lay on its side, still and cold. My heart stopped. "Not again," I muttered, scooping him up. His body was limp. I rubbed his back, whispered nonsense words, prayed under my breath. Luna climbed onto my lap and began licking his face, frantic and relentless. Then, slowly, so slowly, I felt a faint tremor beneath my fingers. A breath. Another. The tiny body jerked wide twice, and then a weak mewl filled the air. I sank back into the chair, eyes burning. Luna curled around him again, her purring low and steady, like a heartbeat. I could swear she looked up at me then, not like a cat, but like a mother thanking another parent for not giving up. For the next few days, our lives fell into rhythm. Every 2 hours, I warmed the milk and fed him. Every time he cried, Luna was there first. She bathed him, kept him clean, even guided him with her paw toward the bottle. I didn't realize it until later, but she'd stopped eating her own food unless he was fed first. Emily called to check in. When I told her about Luna's behavior, she sounded both amazed and cautious. "If she's producing milk even a little, let him nurse," she said. "It'll help her body adjust. Just watch them closely. Remember, Harold, he's still wild at heart." That last part stuck with me. Still wild at heart. One afternoon, while I was chopping wood outside, I noticed claw marks on the doorframe, small but sharp. The kit had managed to crawl out of his bed and was trying to climb the wooden leg of the table. Luna sat nearby, watching proudly. "Attaboy," murmured. "Scout's gonna be trouble." The name came out before I even thought about it. Scout. It fit him somehow, small, brave, born to explore. I wrote it down later in a notebook, just to make it official. Days turned into a week. The storm seemed like a memory. The forest was alive again, birds singing, creeks running clear. Each night, I sat by the stove, watching Luna and Scout sleep. Their breathing synced, one small chest rising inside the rhythm of another. But as peaceful as it looked, I knew this couldn't last forever. Emily's words echoed in my head, still wild at heart. There were moments, tiny flashes, that reminded me of it. When I reached to pick Scout up, his tail flicked, and he hissed, just once, eyes still closed. When Luna stepped away for water, he yowled so loud the sound cut through me. There was something ancient in that cry, something from the mountains, not from any home I knew. That night, I lay awake again. The fire burned low. Luna slept beside Scout, her paw draped across him like a promise she couldn't possibly keep. I thought about Martha, about how she used to hold my hand the same way, even when she was too weak to talk. Maybe love was the same everywhere, in hospitals, in cabins, even in the wild. Maybe it didn't matter what form it took, only that it fought to exist. Outside, the coyotes started howling, their voices stretching across the valley. Luna's ears twitched, but she didn't move. The bobcat stirred, pressing closer to her chest. I stared into the fire until the logs collapsed into embers, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something inside me ease. I wasn't alone anymore. None of us were. The forest, the storm, the cat, the kit. We were all just trying to keep something alive, and somehow, against every rule of nature, it was working. The third week began with frost on the windows and the smell of wet wood smoke curling through the cabin. Montana mornings could cut through flannel, even with the fire burning. Luna was already awake, grooming Scout with slow, deliberate strokes, her tail flicking against his tiny paws. The sound of her purring mixed with the crackle of the stove, a rhythm that somehow kept time with my heartbeat. I had no idea how much work it took to keep something so small alive. Every 2 hours, like clockwork, I warmed bottles of goat's milk, sterilized the rubber tip, and prayed the kitten would drink. Some nights I dozed off in the chair, the bottle slipping from my fingers, only to wake at the faint sound of Scout's cry. High, desperate, the same sound I'd heard the night he came home. It was exhausting, sure, but it gave me purpose again. I hadn't realized how quiet this cabin had been before all this. Now it pulsed with life. Soft sounds, soft breathing. Luna's paws patting across the floor. Scout's tiny claws scratching at the blanket. The low hum of survival. One morning I noticed Scout twitching strangely. His body went stiff for a moment, then limp. My stomach dropped. I reached for him, my fingers trembling. His chest barely moved. Luna's ears flattened. She started circling him, meowing, a thin, trembling sound that didn't sound like her at all. "Come on, buddy," I whispered, rubbing his back. "Stay with me." Nothing. Luna began pawing at his side, desperate. She licked his face, his ears, his paws, over and over, almost frantically. I could hear her breathing quicken. Then, against all logic, Scout gasped. One weak, shallow breath, then another. His tiny body jerked and a faint cry escaped his mouth. Luna collapsed beside him, still purring even though she was shaking. I pressed my palms together and whispered, "Thank you, God." That night I called Emily, my voice still unsteady. She listened quietly, then said, "That's normal at this stage. His lungs are weak. He's surviving because of her warmth. Don't separate them, Harold, not even for a minute." After that, I didn't leave their side. Not for meals, not for chores. I even moved a cot closer to the stove so I could sleep beside them. The three of us, an old man, a housecat, and a wild bobcat, sharing the same patch of floor like it was the center of the world. The weather turned mean again, snow pushing against the cabin walls. The power flickered once or twice, but I didn't care. Luna's milk had started to come in, just a few drops at first, then more each day. It was a miracle I couldn't explain. Emily said something about hormonal response to nurturing behavior, but I knew better. This wasn't science. It was love. Days blurred into nights. Scout grew stronger, his fur fluffier, his meows louder. He'd crawl clumsily toward Luna's tail, biting it as if it were prey, and she'd just sit there, letting him. When he fell asleep, she'd curl around him again, purring deep and low. Still, the fear never left me. The forest outside seemed to watch us, hawks circling above the tree line, coyotes calling in the dark. I kept the door locked even when I chopped wood. A wild bobcat, even a baby, could never truly belong here. I knew that. But try telling that to my heart. One afternoon, I took Scout and Luna outside for a bit of sun. The snow was melting, leaving puddles that reflected the sky. Scout wobbled across the porch, his tiny paws sinking into the wet wood. Luna followed close, ready to catch him if he slipped. For a moment, everything felt normal, like they'd always been mine. Then a sound shattered it, the cry of a full-grown bobcat echoing from the trees. Sharp, guttural, wild. Luna froze. Scout looked up, his ears twitching. The cry came again, closer this time. I picked Scout up fast, heart hammering. "Inside," I whispered. Luna didn't move. She stood at the edge of the porch, tail stiff, her eyes locked on the dark line of the forest. I couldn't tell if it was fear or recognition. Maybe both. That night, neither of us slept much. Every creak made Luna's ears twitch. I sat by the stove, watching her watch the door. The idea hit me like a hammer. What if that cry belonged to Scout's mother? What if Luna really had stolen him from the wild? The thought hurt in ways I didn't expect. The next morning I told Emily. She paused a long while before answering. "If the mother's still out there, she won't stop looking," she said. "But that baby wouldn't survive in the wild now. He's imprinted. On Luna. On you." That word, imprinted, stuck in my head, like a brand you couldn't erase. That afternoon, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching Luna nap beside Scout. She looked peaceful, her paw draped protectively over him. I thought about all the things people spend their lives chasing, money, security, even retirement, and how none of it felt half as important as what was happening in that corner of my cabin. For years, I'd been living like a ghost, checking stock prices I didn't care about, comparing car insurance quotes I'd never use, staring at screens to drown out the quiet. But now the quiet had turned into something sacred. It had a heartbeat. 2 of them, actually. Late that night, the storm picked up again. Wind roared against the shutters, rattling the window glass. I tossed another log into the fire. Luna and Scout were asleep, breathing in unison. For a moment, I let myself believe it could stay like this forever. Then Scout coughed, a deep, wet sound that froze me. He shivered once and went limp again. Luna woke instantly, pawing at him, panicked. I reached for the bottle, for the towels, for anything. But it was Luna who saved him. She pressed her nose to his mouth, licking furiously, then curled her body tight around his chest. I watched, helpless, as her purr grew louder, vibrating through the air like a drumbeat. And somehow it worked. Scout's body twitched, his tiny chest heaved, and then he let out a weak cry, soft but alive. I sank back into the chair, tears burning behind my eyes. "You did it again," I whispered. "You little miracle." Luna looked up at me with tired eyes, then settled back down, tucking the kit under her chin. The firelight flickered across her fur, making her look almost golden. Outside, the wind howled like the wild was mourning its loss. Maybe Luna really did steal Scout. But maybe she was saving him from a world that didn't give second chances. And maybe, just maybe, she'd saved me too. The night stretched on, long and quiet. I sat there until dawn, watching over them both, afraid to blink. Somewhere between the crackling of the fire and the slow rhythm of their breathing, I realized this wasn't just a battle for his life anymore. It was a battle for all of ours. The fourth week began with the sound of melting ice dripping from the roof and the soft crackle of the stove. Outside, the forest was waking up, tiny patches of green pushing through the snow, a promise of spring. Inside the cabin, life was already stirring. Luna lay curled around Scout, her breathing slow, steady. The little bobcat was stronger now, his paws pushing against her belly as he tried to climb over her fur like a mountain. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the cheap kind that tastes like burnt toast but feels like comfort. I'd stopped checking the news, stopped turning on the old radio. My world had narrowed to this cabin, the stove, and the two hearts beating beside it. It wasn't much, but it was everything. That morning, when I lifted Scout for his feeding, Luna growled softly. Not angry, protective. I smiled. Easy, girl. He's yours. I'm just the help. But when I tried to feed him, Scout ignored the bottle. He squirmed, pressing his nose against Luna's belly. I froze, watching. He began to nuzzle her fur, searching. And then, God help me, he started to nurse. At first, I thought it was just instinct, a hungry kit clinging to what felt like safety. But then Luna's body tensed, her eyes widened, and a low, unfamiliar sound rumbled in her chest. She wasn't resisting. She was responding. I called Emily right away. She listened as I tried to explain, my voice half whisper, half disbelief. He's nursing, Emily, and she's letting him. Emily was quiet for a moment, then said, Harold, it's rare, but not impossible. False lactation, a maternal hormone response. It can happen in animals under stress or when love overrides biology. Her words sank into me like warm sunlight through cold glass. When love overrides biology. I sat there on the floor beside them, watching the impossible happen in front of me. Luna purred louder than I'd ever heard, her eyes half closed, her paw resting gently on Scout's back. And Scout, he wasn't just alive. He was thriving. Days passed, and the miracle continued. Luna's body adapted, producing just enough milk to keep Scout content between bottle feedings. Her instincts sharpened. She cleaned him, taught him to groom himself, and even guided him to the litter box, though he preferred to tumble clumsily across the blankets instead. Sometimes I'd catch myself laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh I hadn't known since Martha died. The cabin no longer felt like a place I was waiting to leave. It felt like home again. I'd started documenting their progress on an old camcorder my grandson had given me. For your fishing videos, he'd said once. I never filmed a single fish, but I filmed them, Luna and Scout, because I needed proof that something this pure existed. I didn't plan to share it online, but part of me thought maybe, just maybe, the world needed to see what kindness looked like when no one was watching. One evening, after feeding Scout, I sat by the fire with Luna in my lap. She was thinner now, her energy spent, but her eyes glowed brighter than ever. Scout stumbled across the floor toward us, still wobbly on his paws. He tried to climb up her side, mewling softly. She leaned down, grabbed him by the scruff, and pulled him close. He nestled beneath her chin and fell asleep. I thought about all the cruel headlines I used to read online, stories of people hurting each other for nothing. Yet here was a creature who had nothing to gain, giving everything she had to keep another alive. That night, the wind picked up again, whispering through the cracks in the walls. The smell of pine smoke filled the air. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, watching the shadows dance. My reflection looked older than I remembered, gray hair, tired eyes. But there was something else there, to a quiet kind of peace. When the fire burned low, I lay down on the cot beside them. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but I did. Some time near dawn, a soft cry woke me. Scout was restless, pawing at Luna's chest. She shifted, licking him once, then turned her eyes to me. I swear she was asking for help. I reached over, rubbing her side gently. And that's when I felt it, warmth beneath her fur, soft and full. Luna had milk. Real milk. The realization hit me like thunder. I sat there in awe, hand resting on her side, feeling life pulse beneath my fingers. It wasn't supposed to happen. It couldn't happen. But it did. I whispered, "You did this, Luna. You made this miracle happen." When Emily came the next morning, she confirmed it. "You're witnessing something rare, Harold," she said. "It's her body's way of responding to emotional need. She's not just caring for him. Her body believes he's her child." Emily smiled and added softly, "It's the kind of story that makes people believe in love again." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, and maybe in second chances, too." After she left, I sat outside for a while. The sun had broken through the clouds, lighting up the snow like gold. From inside the cabin, I could hear Luna's steady purring and the faint mewl of Scout. I thought about all the things I'd lost, my wife, my friends, the years that slipped away quietly, and how somehow this wild little creature had brought it all back. Life insurance commercials always talk about protecting what matters most. But sitting there on that porch, I realized protection isn't about money or plans. It's about heart, about holding on when the world says, let go, about choosing love even when it doesn't make sense. As the day faded into dusk, I walked back inside. The room was dim, the fire burning low. Luna lifted her head, eyes soft and knowing. Scout was asleep again, his tiny body curled into the hollow of her chest. I poured one last cup of coffee, the steam rising between us. "You're a better soul than most humans I've met," I told her. She blinked once, slow and calm, as if she understood. The night settled around us, quiet and gentle. I turned off the lamp and let the firelight dance across the walls. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of the empty house pressing on me. There was warmth. There was life. And there, in the soft rhythm of her purring, I heard the truth Emily had hinted at. Sometimes, love alone is enough to rewrite the laws of nature. By the time the snow melted off the pines and the creek began to sing again, Scout had doubled in size. His spots were fading into the tawny coat of a young hunter, and his legs had grown long enough to stumble after Luna wherever she went. She had become both teacher and guardian, her patience as steady as the mountain wind. I often found myself wondering who was learning more, Scout from her or me from both of them. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings were for feeding and cleaning, afternoons for small adventures around the cabin. I'd open the door and watch as Scout sniffed at the porch boards, testing the air. The first time he stepped into the sunlight, he blinked like someone seeing the world for the first time. Luna followed, her tail brushing his side, as if to remind him he wasn't alone. One afternoon, I saw her crouched low in the yard, eyes locked on a drifting leaf. She flicked her tail once. Scout froze, then copied her posture exactly, hindquarters wiggling, paws steady. Luna pounced, catching the leaf mid-air. Scout leapt too, missed completely, and rolled over in the dirt. I laughed until my ribs hurt. She walked over and batted him gently on the head before lying down beside him as if to say, "Try again tomorrow." Watching them was like watching life begin all over again. Every small success felt like a miracle. The first time Scout used the litter box, The first time he climbed onto the couch without help. The first time he tried to mimic Luna's purr. His was a rough, uneven rumble, like a truck trying to start in winter. Luna answered with her deep, even hum, patient and warm. Still, I knew what he was, a wild thing wearing the face of a child. When he played too roughly, his claws drew blood. When the fire crackled too loud, his head whipped toward the sound, muscles tense. There were nights when he'd wake in the dark and hiss at the shadows, and Luna would settle beside him, pressing her body close until he calmed. One Saturday, the peace broke in the smallest way. I was out front repairing a loose hinge on the shed when I heard a sharp cry from inside the cabin. It wasn't Scout, it was Luna. I dropped the tools and ran in. The living room looked like a storm had hit it. A small vase was shattered on the floor, and Scout stood in the middle of it, fur puffed out, eyes wide. In front of him was little Clara Henderson, my neighbor's 9-year-old granddaughter. She'd come over to drop off some homemade muffins, her red boots leaving wet prints on the floor. "Mr. Bennett!" she cried. "He scratched me!" Blood ran down her wrist, a shallow line, but it looked worse than it was. Luna darted forward, positioning herself between Clara and Scout. She growled, low, not at Clara, but at anyone who might come closer. I grabbed a towel and knelt beside the girl. "It's all right, honey. He didn't mean it. He's scared." Clara sniffled, eyes wide. "He's not like a kitten, is he?" "No," I said softly. "He's not." After her mother came to pick her up, I sat in the quiet cabin, the weight of what had happened pressing on my chest. Scout hid behind the couch, ears flat. Luna lay in front of him, her eyes half closed, like she understood the trouble but couldn't change what he was. That night, I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, something I hadn't done in months. The firelight flickered across the walls as I stared at the two of them sleeping together, the wild and the tame bound by something stronger than blood. When Emily stopped by the next morning, I told her about Clara. She examined Scout's growing frame and nodded gravely. "He's maturing faster than a housecat," she said. "It's in his nature. You'll start seeing more of that wild behavior now, territorial instinct, reflex aggression." I sighed. "He's still just a baby." "I know," she said, "but wild animals grow up differently. He's learning from her, but someday instinct will take over. You have to be ready for that." Her words sat heavy on me all day. I went about my chores, the dishes, the firewood, even paying the utility bill online. But I couldn't shake the thought that this peace might not last. That evening, I took Scout outside again. The world was turning gold with sunset, the air filled with the smell of thawing earth. He bounded through the grass, pouncing on invisible prey. Luna watched from the steps, her tail twitching. I sat beside her, scratching her head. "You did good, girl," I whispered. "You gave him a chance." Scout turned toward the woods at the edge of the clearing, his ears perked, his body tensing. Somewhere far off, a bobcat called, a deep, echoing cry that sent shivers up my spine. Scout froze, then answered with a smaller version of the same sound. Luna stood, her gaze following his. I held my breath. The forest was quiet again, but something had changed. Scout's eyes glowed with curiosity, hunger, maybe even recognition. I called softly, "Come on, boy, let's go in." He hesitated, then turned back to me, trotting toward the cabin. Luna brushed past me to follow him, but before she went inside, she looked back once at the trees. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cry of that unseen bobcat played over in my head. I wondered if it was Scout's mother, if some bond between them still lingered in the air. Nature didn't care about emotions, about who raised who. It cared about survival. But here we were, rewriting that rule every single day. Before I turned in, I checked on them one last time. Scout was sprawled across Luna's stomach, fast asleep. She looked exhausted but content, her paw resting on his side. I thought of Martha. Again, how she'd cradle our grandson when he fell asleep on the couch, humming softly to keep him dreaming. "Guess love's the same, no matter what shape it comes in," I whispered. The room was warm, filled with the steady sound of their breathing. For a moment I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this strange little family could stay together forever. But deep down, under all that peace, I could feel the forest waiting for the day it would call him home. By late summer, the days stretched long and golden over the valley. The river ran low, the air smelled of sap and dust, and every evening the sun melted behind the mountains like a dying ember. Scout was no longer the fragile creature Luna carried in from the storm. He'd grown lean and powerful, his shoulders broad, his paws silent on the wood floors. Sometimes I'd catch him crouched by the window, eyes fixed on the tree line. His muscles would tense, tail flicking back and forth. Luna would notice, pad over to him, and press her head against his neck until his body relaxed. She'd purr softly, like a mother trying to hush a restless child. But even I could see it. The wild inside him was waking up. He was still gentle with her most of the time. But when they played, the sound changed. It wasn't soft anymore. There were growls now, low guttural ones that made the hairs on my arms stand up. One night, while I was sweeping the floor, Scout lunged too hard and caught Luna's ear with his claw. She yelped and backed away, a streak of red on her fur. I dropped the broom. "Scout!" He froze, pupils wide, chest heaving. For a heartbeat, he looked ready to run or fight. Then Luna stepped forward and licked his face, as if to forgive him before I could even speak. But forgiveness didn't erase the fear that crawled up my spine. I cleaned Luna's ear and tried to calm myself. But when I lay in bed that night, the image replayed again and again. The sound of his claws, the look in his eyes. The next morning, I called Emily. She listened quietly while I told her what happened. Then she sighed, her voice low and steady. "Harold, this was always coming," she said. "He's not a housecat. His instincts are changing. It's not his fault. It's who he is." I rubbed my forehead. "You're saying I should let him go?" "I'm saying if you keep him too long, someone could get hurt. He'll outgrow this space. You, Luna, he could turn on either of you without meaning to." Her words hit me harder than I expected. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee. It wasn't just the thought of losing Scout. It was the thought of Luna losing him. She'd carried him through everything. What would happen to her when he was gone? That afternoon, the clouds rolled in, heavy and gray. I chopped wood out back, trying to keep my mind busy. But my hands weren't steady. Every swing of the axe felt heavier. When I came inside, the room was quiet, too quiet. The blanket by the stove was empty. I called their names, but only Luna came running. Her tail lashed nervously, ears flicking toward the back door. "Where's Scout?" I asked. She meowed once, short and sharp, then darted toward the porch. I followed. Out by the shed, Scout stood rigid, his fur bristling, staring at something just beyond the fence line. I looked where he was looking and froze. A full-grown bobcat was there, bigger, stronger, her coat mottled with scars. Her eyes glowed amber in the fading light. She didn't move, just watched. Luna hissed, stepping in front of Scout. The mother, because that's what she had to be, took one slow step forward. I whispered, "Oh God." For a moment the three of them stood there, two mothers and the child they both claimed. The forest buzzed with cicadas, the world holding its breath. Then, just as quickly as she'd come, the wild bobcat turned and vanished into the trees. Scout bolted after her. "Scout, no!" I ran, slipping on the wet grass. But Luna was faster. She caught up to him at the edge of the clearing, blocking his path. The sound that came out of her wasn't a meow, it was a cry. A deep, trembling cry that cut straight through me. Scout stopped, chest heaving, torn between two worlds. Then he turned back toward the cabin. I sank to my knees, heart pounding. The forest swallowed the silence again, leaving only the echo of that cry behind. That night, Luna didn't eat. She lay by the door, staring into the dark, as if she expected the woods to bring him back. I sat beside her, hand resting on her back. "He's changing, girl," I whispered. "You can't stop it. Neither can I." The next few days passed like a slow goodbye. Scout slept less, paced more. Sometimes he'd disappear into the yard for hours, only returning when the sun went down. I caught him stalking birds once, silent, focused, terrifyingly graceful. When he realized I was watching, he froze, then slunk back toward the porch like a guilty teenager. That evening, Emily stopped by again. She looked at Scout, at Luna, at me. "He needs more space," she said softly. "There's a wildlife rehabilitation center near Flathead Forest. They can teach him how to live out there, how to survive." Luna rubbed against my leg, unaware of the decision hanging in the air. I swallowed hard. "If we take him there, will he remember us?" Emily smiled sadly. "Maybe. But memory isn't the same as belonging." I didn't sleep that night. I walked from room to room, turning off lights that didn't need turning off. The fire burned down to embers. Luna curled up by the window, eyes open, watching the moonlight spill across the floor. In the early hours, I made up my mind. I called Emily, told her I'd bring him tomorrow. She said she'd meet us at dawn. When I hung up, I poured myself a cup of coffee I didn't need and sat down beside Luna. Scout was asleep, stretched, out beside her, his paw resting on her tail. "You did your job," I said quietly. "You gave him more than the wild ever could." She blinked, slow and tired, as if she understood. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the pines. It carried the scent of rain and something else, something bittersweet, like the end of a story you don't want to finish. I sat there until morning, the fire dying behind me, the sky turning pale. Luna stayed by his side the whole time, her purrs fading into silence. Sometimes love means holding on with everything you've got, but sometimes it means learning how to let go. Dawn broke gray and quiet over the mountains, the kind of morning that feels like the sky already knows what's coming. The rain had started before sunrise, soft, steady, the kind that seeps into your bones without you noticing. I'd loaded the truck while the coffee brewed, every movement heavy, like each sound might wake a dream I didn't want to end. Scout sat on the porch, watching me. His golden eyes were calm, curious, unaware of what the day meant. Luna stayed close to him, her tail brushing his back, her ears twitching every time I moved. She'd been restless all night, pacing from window to door as if she sensed something shifting in the air. Emily pulled up just after 7, her headlights cutting through the mist. She stepped out, coat pulled tight, and gave me that look, half sympathy, half conviction. "Morning, Harold," she said softly. "You ready?" I nodded, though my throat felt like sandpaper. As I'll ever be. We'd lined the crate with old flannel and hay. It wasn't a cage, just a small wooden box with holes for air, but the sight of it made my chest ache. Scout sniffed at it curiously, then turned to Luna. She licked his head once, twice, as if to memorize the taste of him. When I lifted him, he didn't fight me. He just looked up, eyes wide, trusting. That trust was the hardest thing to bear. I set him gently inside the crate, closed the latch, and whispered, "It's just a ride, boy. You'll be safe." Luna meowed, soft and pleading. The sound tore through me like a knife. I crouched down beside her, resting a hand on her back. "He needs to go, girl," I murmured. "You've done all you can." She pressed against my palm, then turned back to the crate. For a moment, she just stood there, tail trembling, before climbing into the truck bed and curling up beside it. I didn't have the heart to move her. The drive to the wildlife center took nearly 2 hours. The rain followed us the whole way, drumming gently on the roof. I kept my eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel. Emily sat beside me, quiet, except for the occasional sigh. Halfway there, I asked, "You think he'll remember her?" She hesitated. "Maybe. But bobcats don't live by memory the way we do. They live by instinct. He'll carry her lessons, though. That's what matters." I swallowed hard. "And what about her?" Emily's voice softened. "Cats grieve too, Harold. Give her time. She'll find her rhythm again." The rain grew heavier as we wound through the forest roads. The wipers squeaked against the glass, keeping time with my heartbeat. Every mile felt like a goodbye I wasn't ready to say. When we arrived, the staff at the Flathead Wildlife Rehabilitation Center were already waiting. A tall man in a green jacket met us at the gate. "You must be Mr. Bennett," he said. "We've prepared an enclosure for him, spacious, quiet, near others his age." I opened the truck bed. Luna jumped down immediately, trotting to the crate. She circled it once, sniffed the corners, then sat down, her fur darkened by rain. The man smiled gently. "You can bring her in for a minute if you'd like. It helps the transition." Inside, the air smelled of cedar and damp straw. They led us to a small clearing with a wooden shelter at the edge of the trees. I opened the crate, hands shaking. Scout stepped out slowly, nose twitching, eyes darting between me and Luna. "Go on," I whispered. "This is your home now." He took a few cautious steps forward, then turned back. Luna approached, pressing her head against his neck one last time. Her purring was faint, almost broken. Scout nuzzled her, then pulled away, moving toward the open woods beyond the enclosure. The rain blurred everything, the trees, the ground, even the line between the wild and what we'd built for him. I knelt down beside Luna, the cold soaking through my jeans. "You did it, girl," I said, voice cracking. "You brought him back to where he belongs." She didn't move. She just stared through the wire fence, her eyes following him until he vanished into the mist. When I stood, Emily put a hand on my shoulder. "It's the right thing," she said. "Right doesn't mean easy," I answered. On the drive back, the truck felt too quiet. The crate sat empty in the back, rocking slightly with each turn. Luna lay on the seat beside me, silent. She kept her eyes on the window, watching the rain trace long lines down the glass. At home, I carried her inside and set the crate by the door. She walked straight to the rug by the window, the spot where Scout used to sleep, and lay down. For hours, she didn't move. I sat nearby, listening to the rain ease off the roof, thinking of every sound, every heartbeat that now belonged to the forest instead of me. That night, I couldn't bring myself to turn on the lights. The fire burned low, throwing shadows across the room. Luna finally climbed into my lap, her body trembling. She looked tired, older somehow. I stroked her back and whispered, "You did good, Luna. You gave him the wild, and you gave me peace." She closed her eyes, purring softly. Outside, the rain began to fade, replaced by the steady drip of water from the eaves. I looked out the window, half expecting to see a small shape at the edge of the trees. But the yard was empty, blanketed in fog. Before going to bed, I brewed one last cup of coffee, the smell filling the quiet cabin. My hand shook as I poured it, though I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or from everything I'd let go of that day. I sat down beside Luna and said what I hadn't been able to all day. "Goodbye, Scout." It wasn't just a farewell to a wild creature. It was to the part of me that had learned to love again. When I woke the next morning, the rain had stopped. The air was clear and sunlight spilled across the floor. Luna was still by the window, watching the forest with calm, steady eyes. Some goodbyes, I realized, don't end in silence. They echo quietly in the spaces we keep open for love to return. And in that quiet, under the wide Montana sky, the world felt both emptier and somehow more whole. Winter came early that year. By late November, the mountains wore a coat of whitewood, and the pines bent beneath the weight of fresh snow. The air outside my cabin carried that clean, sharp stillness only Montana winters know. Inside, the world was smaller now, quiet, warm, and still carrying the faint echo of purring that had once filled every corner. It had been 3 months since we left Scout at the rehabilitation center. The first few weeks were the hardest. Luna hardly ate. She spent her days perched at the window, eyes fixed on the forest. At night, she had moved from room to room, meowing softly, as if calling for someone who might answer back. I tried to keep her company. I talked more than I had in years, about weather, old memories, even about the stock market reports that came in on the radio, though neither of us really cared about the price of gold or car insurance rates anymore. We'd both been through something that money could never buy and logic could never explain. Still, the house felt too big without him. Christmas came and went. I strung a few lights on the porch, more for tradition than cheer, and set out a plate of cookies like Martha used to. Luna watched from the window as snow fell thick and silent. That night I found her asleep by the door, her paw resting on the old wool scarf I'd once wrapped Scout in. Time does strange things when you live alone. Days blur into weeks, and before you know it, a whole season has passed. I stopped counting after New Year's, but one morning, as February crept in, something changed. I was chopping wood out back when Luna's cry split the cold air. It wasn't her usual sound. It was sharp, urgent. I dropped the axe and followed the noise. She stood by the tree line, tail stiff, eyes wide. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, just beyond the snow-covered brush, a shadow moved. A bobcat. He was larger than I remembered, sleek, powerful, his coat thick and golden under the weak sunlight. But those eyes, I knew them, gold flecked with amber, the same eyes that had once looked up at me from a blanket by the stove. "Scout!" breathed. He stepped forward cautiously, muscles coiled, head low. I could see the wild in him now, that quiet confidence the forest gives to its own. Luna didn't move. She stood still, tail trembling as he approached. When he reached her, he didn't growl or shy away. He simply leaned in and pressed his head against hers. It was only for a moment, but in that moment, the world stopped. Then, as quickly as he came, Scout turned. He padded a few feet back into the woods, then stopped and dropped something at the edge of the clearing, a small, limp bird, a gift. He looked back once, the wind tugging at his fur, and vanished into the trees. Luna sniffed at the bird, then sat down beside it, staring into the forest. I joined her, unable to speak. There was nothing to say. He'd come home, in his own way. That night I sat by the fire, thinking about what it all meant. The wild doesn't send thank you cards. It doesn't say goodbye. But somehow I knew what that visit was. Scout's way of saying he was alive, that he remembered. He'd brought back what little he could, not for himself, but for her, for us. I poured a cup of coffee and sat on the porch, the air crisp and bright with starlight. Luna curled beside me, purring softly, her eyes half closed. Out in the distance, I thought I heard another cry, a deep echoing call that rolled down from the hills. Maybe it was Scout. Maybe it was just the wind. But it didn't matter. I smiled. We humans like to think love needs to be explained, labeled, measured. But the truth is simpler. Sometimes love just is. It exists in the small, impossible places, between a storm and a heartbeat, between the tame and the wild. And in those moments, it becomes eternal. Luna never stopped watching the woods after that. Every evening, she'd settle by the window, eyes fixed on the horizon. Some nights, when the moon was bright, I swore I saw two small lights glowing back from the tree line. Maybe it was just my old eyes playing tricks. Or maybe it was Scout keeping his promise. I started writing again, not letters or journals, but little stories about them, about how a cat with no kittens found a son in the wild, and how that son found his way home again. I figured someday my grandson might read them and understand what life is really about. Not comfort or convenience, but connection. Funny thing is, when I shared one of those stories online, people started writing back. Strangers from all over said it reminded them of hope, of faith, of what they'd lost and found again. One woman wrote, "Your story made me believe in miracles." I thought about that for a while. Maybe we all need to believe in miracles, especially the kind that don't ask for proof. By spring, Luna had gained her strength back. Her fur gleamed again, her steps lighter. She'd nap by the window all day, purring as the wind carried the smell of pine and earth through the cabin. Sometimes she'd glance at me as if to say, "See? He's all right." And every time, I'd nod and smile. I don't know how many years we have left, she and I. But I do know this. Every morning, when the sun rises over the mountains, it feels a little warmer, a little closer. The world may have taken Scout back, but it left us something precious: peace. So if you ever find yourself doubting the goodness of this world, remember this story. Remember that love can bridge species, that compassion can rewrite instinct, and that sometimes the smallest creatures can teach us the biggest lessons about life. Because in one quiet cabin on the edge of the Montana forest, a cat once stole a baby bobcat from the wild, and in doing so, she gave an old man his heart back. And that, my friend, is a kind of miracle you can't put a price on. Before you go, tell me something. Did this story touch your heart the way it did mine? If it did, just drop a simple 1 in the comments so I know you were here with us till the end. And if you'd like to walk beside me through more true stories of love, loss, and the wild, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. There's always another miracle waiting out there in the woods, and I'd be honored to share it with you.